The relationship is one that is actually imposed by our educational system. So most of us learn our history through schools, and there is a certain narrative that is shared through our school textbooks, through our national education lessons. And we grow up believing, for many years for instance, that Singapore's history started in 1819, that the founder was Sir Stamford Raffles, and then after that there was this journey to nationhood, and we overcame adversities of war, occupation, and then merger and separation, and then Singapore became moved from a third to a first world country. I think after a while, young Singaporeans particularly feel that this is all a bit of a propaganda, and that they want to hear a more exciting story of our past. They want to hear the controversies, they want to hear about the tensions. Surely everything is not that great, right? But where are the dirt, in other words? So I think what is happening is that you're going to see more and more people asking questions about our national narrative. Not that our national narrative is wrong, but I think they want to see where are the edges, where are the complexities, where are the nuances. And I think if we are able to bring that about, that would of course get people more excited about our history. So this has something to do with our national policies. In 1965, when Singapore became a sovereign state, the political leaders were thinking, how should we think about our history as we build a nation? In other words, as we project forward, what sort of historical past should we try to remember, and how that would help in the enterprise of nation building? I think the political leaders decided that the most neutral party would be the British. I mean, they were colonialists, no doubt, but at least they brought, according to them, modernity to Singapore. So the best was to identify the British and the part they played in building Singapore as a colony leading to a modern city-state. The other thing is Singapore did not go through a period of mass-based nationalist movement or revolution. Now, if you were to compare, say, with India, India went through half a century of nationalist movement. So at that time, the idea was about self-rule, the idea was about freedom from colonialism, and of course, colonialism was portrayed as evil and wrong. So to build your new nation, you have to have the negative other, and that negative other was the colonialists. In Singapore, we didn't go through that. In fact, we didn't have a revolution. We had what was called a transfer of power. In other words, when the British decided that it was time for them to go, they found a good set of successors, and power was more or less handed to this group of people. So there wasn't that rupture. There wasn't that violent disjuncture between the nationalists and the colonialists, and therefore, the kinds of antagonism that you see in other countries, other Asian countries, of their colonial masters did not happen in Singapore. My answer is not going to surprise you, because as a historian of India, I have found that, I studied the nationalist movement, and I found that Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of the Indian nationalist movement from about the 1920s onwards, was a really fascinating figure, and someone whom I have great interest in. So he has once been described by Winston Churchill, who found him a bit of a nemesis, as a half-naked fakir. Fakir is an Indian holy man, and British politicians have found him very difficult to deal with, because they say that he was either a saint trying to be a politician, or a politician pretending to be a saint, because of his methods, of his ability to adopt a certain personal lifestyle and then develop very interesting methods of contesting the empire. The whole idea of non-violent movements, the whole idea of civil disobedience, the whole idea of what he calls soul force or satyagraha, which means that you don't use weapons to fight against the colonialists. You use the whole idea of what's right and wrong. And I think he succeeded. He succeeded in doing that. So what was remarkable was that he was able, through non-violence, literally bring about an end to the British Empire. and then in a way personified what he thought was important for the Indian people, and that is basically a belief in themselves, a belief that they have a great civilization, that they had what it takes to regain their rightful place in their own country. So the concept of Swadeshi, self-reliance, self-rule, were concepts that he developed. There are also aspects of his life which people have criticized, in the way he had to keep a certain existence, a certain lifestyle that was quite complicated. The way he refused to negotiate with the British at certain points in time when he had the upper hand, because he felt that some of the things that had happened were not what he wanted, like activities degenerating into violence. So a very complicated man, but one that had tremendous impact. Unfortunately, no. I think maybe because I talk too much about history at home. But they think of history as subjects, and I think that is the problem. They think when I talk of history that, I want them to be historians, I want them to read history books, I want them to major in history, which is not my intention. I just want them to appreciate historical depth in anything they encounter. I think they did not enjoy history, the history they learned in the classroom, and in a way that developed in them that aversion. But I'm sure when they get to their 30s, they will have a better appreciation. I meet people all the time who tell me when they were in school they hated history, but now they're in their 30s and in their 40s, history is now one of their most favorite topics, because they find that it's so enriching and so important. You look at popular culture, you look at Netflix. I mean, there are of course a lot of these shows about sitcoms and all this, but the more successful ones are the historical dramas. And I think there is an interest in history, but it's just that people see history as a burden when they are in school.